It was at St. Augustine, Florida, that the Spanish established a permanent settlement back in 1565. And with their British rivals inching closer to the Spanish territory, with their establishment of Carolina, the Spanish were seeking all the assistance they can get in the defense of their North American territory. And we will now take our trip to that side of Florida to see what the state has to say about these self-emancipators. Right now, we are in St. Augustine. Right. Invincible? After marching through miles of wilderness, the Castillo is within sight, seemingly close. And can it be taken? A treacherous obstacle course of rising slopes, low walls, and a moat, all protected by Spanish soldiers and cannons, await anyone foolish enough to attack. The massive high walls of the fort provide its defenders with a perfect view of enemy movements. The cannons within the star-shaped fort are positioned to catch attackers in a deadly crossfire. In 1702 and 1740, attackers tried long sieges rather than attempt a direct assault on this fortress. Oh, so I have it in Spanish as well. What if we could just walk right through the field? You see the history here is very dismissive of the rich African history, which is very typical of here in Florida. This is information that you got to dig up, man. You got to dig deep. You got to go to the archives. You got to read the primary sources. You got to look up the historians that are discussing this kind of thing. Because if you don't, and you just go to these public spaces and read the little plaques that they have on these fortresses, you would think that there was no such thing as African people. But the reality is, they were very heavily involved in all these conflicts going on in this place. In spite of the fact that there is a noticeable absence of this black history here at St. Augustine, the influence was very real. After Carolina was established in the 1670s, the West Central Africans and the Upper Guinea Africans that were being imported into the British colony in such large numbers started to escape south towards Florida. By 1683, St. Augustine established its first black and mulatto militia. The British establishment of Charlestown in 1670 represented a serious challenge to Spanish supremacy in the region. This compelled the Spanish to make use of the self-emancipating Africans to strengthen their posts. In the 1680s, Governor Diego de Quiroga reported several Africans who escaped from Carolina and requested baptism into the true faith on the basis that the governor did not return them to the British. These Africans were instructed under the Catholic faith, a religion that was not very foreign to many of the Bakongo self-emancipators because of the trade relations that the Congo Kingdom had with Portugal since 1482. In addition, according to historian Jane Landers, they worked as ironsmiths and laborers on the Fort Castillo de San Marcos. Women were employed in the households. As waves of self-emancipating Africans continued to escape into Spanish Florida, on November 7, 1693, Charles II of Spain issued the first official edict, giving liberty to all, the men as well as the women, so that by their example and by the king's liberality, others will do the same. These Africans who escaped were to exchange military service in defense of Florida for the recognized freedom from the enslavement under Spanish law. By the year 1708, the black population outnumbered whites in the Carolina colony. This increased African population led to the growing resistance. In 1711 and 1714, there were slave revolts in the British colony. 1 year later, the Yamasee Wars were waged between a variety of indigenous Americans and enslaved Africans on one side, and the British colonialists on the other. The indigenous Americans in the region had developed an alliance with the British settlers in Carolina until it became apparent that the European settlers placed more value in enslaving natives than they were in establishing friendships. Natives were sold in a North American slave trade traversing the mainland as well as the Caribbean islands. Once the indigenous Americans were fed up with this, they waged war against the English settlers and had the enslaved Africans of Carolina on their side. According to Jane Landers, the natives and the Africans almost succeeded in exterminating the badly outnumbered whites. What prevented this reality was the fact that there were some natives who were loyal to the British who assisted in driving the rebellious natives and Africans out of the area. This led to yet another surge of Africans and natives into Florida. A tight bond developed between the Yamasee and the Africans as many of them continued to flee into Florida. This culture of running away had become so paramount that the British decided to establish in 1732 the colony of Georgia as a free colony where slavery would not be permitted. This colony would serve as a buffer between the slave society of South Carolina and the freedom that the Africans were seeking in Florida. James Oglethorpe, the founder of the buffer colony, wanted to establish a debtor colony where England's debt-ridden citizens can come and work off their debts, then making a living for themselves without having to worry about the competition from the wealthy, slave-owning planter elite, who too often stifled competition with their control over land, labor, and markets. Despite the presence of Georgia, Africans continued to escape south into Florida, offering their alliances to the Spanish government to the point that a separate black town of approximately 100 was established 2 miles north of St. Augustine, known as Gracia Real de Santa Teresa de Mose, for short, known as Fort Mose. And this is where we will take our next journey.